And we'll sit up at the table here, is that all right? Thanks for being here, everybody, and thanks very much to Dick and the Adirondack Explorer for having me be involved in this. I'm Brian Mann from North Country Public Radio, and Assemblyman Dan Stec, thank you very much for being here. Welcome.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the invitation today.
Sure. Well, let's start broadly. I mean, you know, as you've been hearing, there is something of a consensus in this room that there is more regulation needed to protect water quality and other values in the park. That there is maybe a larger role for the Adirondack Park Agency to play, and maybe the DEC and other agencies as well. Give us the view from outside this room. If you took that message tomorrow to the Warren County Board of Supervisors or to local leaders across the park and said, this is what I'm hearing, what would the response be, do you think?
Well, before I go to the local reaction, I think certainly the reaction at the state level right now, the very first thing that's going to come to everyone's mind is resources funding. You know, I was at the public hearing a couple weeks ago for the Bond Act that Assemblyman Sweeney, the chair of the NCON committee, on the ranking minority member on it, he had a public hearing on it, and what we heard was environmental group after environmental group saying, hey, we like the idea of setting up capital reserve fund to fund water projects and wastewater projects throughout the state, but we're concerned that the funding, the day-to-day budget funding isn't there for DEC to enforce the current situation and APA status. So there's a budgetary challenge here that has to go with that. So that's the reality in all of it. A local reaction. Well, first let me start by saying before I was in the Assembly, I was the Queensbury County Supervisor for 9 years and chairman of the Warren County Board for a couple of years. And I can tell you that Queensbury is very proud of the work that we've been able to do, but Queensbury is a different town from a lot of Adirondack towns. 103 municipalities in the park, and only 18 have an approved APA land use plan. Queensbury is one of those 18. We've had one for decades. And I think any time a municipality can have a little more self-control on the land use issue, I think that they would prefer that. So for the life of me, I would think that more of them would be wanting to do that. But again, I'm putting myself in some of those other towns' shoes. They may not have the financial resources. I mean, Queensbury is a large town. We've got the staffing in place to do a lot of these things. But I'm not sure that local government, the land use classification for the new purchases is a hot issue right now in the park, and the elected officials in those towns are a little more concerned about the economy, the economic balance. Our previous speaker in Lake Tahoe was talking about the triple bottom line, and I think that's the kind of perspective that you're seeing from local municipalities, is that they're not sure that more regulation is what's needed for their town. So it's a conversation that we need to keep having.
There is this talk about reopening the Adirondack Park Agency Act, reopening the private land use plan. If that happened, it would have to go to Albany. You would be sort of on the front lines of that. Do you see an appetite in Albany? Do you see an opening here with the Common Ground Alliance and other discussions that have been going on for the kind of conversation that could reform state laws in a responsible way?
I think it seems to me, and I've only got 9 months under my belt down in Albany, but right now there's a lot of focus on some of the land purchase and the classifications that need to happen, and I can see just from that process that there's a lot of political concern coming from all directions on this process. So I would guess that they're probably thinking, opening the APA Act right now. Do we have the desire to open that larger can of worms? But if people in the room here are advocating for that, feel that's necessary, I think what's important from an Albany perspective is, hopefully no one dislikes the term, but the reality is the political situation. Is there less risk? Is there a willingness? So that's where the Common Ground Alliance and the local officials, I think if there's a view from Albany that there's less risk for confrontation or a big disagreement on the direction to go, that you're going to have the local officials more or less on the same page. If they're both asking, yes, we'd like this reopened, and there's 5 or 6 things that we mostly agree on that we'd like to revisit, that's when I think you're increasing the likelihood that all of them will say, okay, let's look at it. But if they're looking at a big controversial situation, I think it's a lot less likely that all of them want to pick that up.
When you think about the park agency, and this conference is really focusing on thinking about where the APA goes forward, from your time in Queensbury and now your time as assemblyman, I'm going to ask sort of 2 questions about this. First of all, do you see any place that the APA needs to be stronger to protect the environment? Are there parts of the ecology of the park that they don't have the right tools, or they're not doing the right thing to protect right now? Anything that seems like a red flag to you there?
Well, my own personal opinion, I think that the biggest challenge that I've seen in the park in recent years has been invasive species, aquatic invasive species. Maybe that's because from a local government perspective, we're looking at the dollar amounts involved in combating this. If your water quality goes, with invasive species, so go the land values and the tax base. You've got an ecological and economic problem with that. But certainly I think there's compelling arguments to be made about stormwater. And the town and the county of Warren has done a good job. I'm proud of some of the things we did, and I thank certainly Peter and Chris for the compliment and shout out that they gave the town of Queensbury on their efforts. It's always a balancing act, though. I mean, you try to go and do something for the lake, and there's going to be a lot of lake property owners that recognize the value and they want it done, and you're going to have a next door neighbor that's saying, I pay a lot of taxes, and on top of that, you're going to make me do X, Y, and Z, and you're setting yourself up at the local level for problems. These are the people that are saying, hey, we're already taxed to death, and now you're going to put more burden on us. And so you're trying to walk that fine line, but I think the town has done some good things. Warren County with the Beach Road project, that's a pretty significant initiative, cutting edge technology that they're trying out on pervious pavement along the length of Beach Road. It's a big project, and of course right next to it is the Gaslight project, the Westbrook project. So we've been proactive, but I personally think that a lot of our pollution problems on the stormwater runoff are coming from Route 9 and the industry. So there's some things there, but stormwater and aquatic basis are the biggest issue.
I'm going to come back to what you guys did in Queensbury and Warren County in just a moment, but before I do, I want to ask the other side of it. When you think about the park agency and its role vis-a-vis community health and the economy, as you said before, you think a lot of Adirondack communities are failing. So is there one big change the APA can make that you think would help that problem and would boost communities?
First, I should start by saying, that I don't have a 40-year perspective on the Adirondack Park issues. I haven't been engaged in it for as long, but I have for the last 15 years. And I would say in the last 3 or 4 years, and I think a lot of them, perhaps some of it should be credited to the individuals, Lonnie and DC, Joe Martens. But I've noticed, and I think that a lot of my former colleagues at the local level would agree, and they have agreed with me, that they think that DEC and APA have been better to work with. They like the pendulum swing that they're perceiving. That may not be true for people in this room. They say, hey, we kind of like the pendulum over here. I think that you're dealing with saying justice delayed is justice denied, and so I'm always been a process guy, and people want to have a predictable, consistent process. They want to get through as quickly as possible because time is money. They're paying lawyers, they're paying engineers, and they don't want to be nitpicked. They want to tell me where the goal line is, don't move the goal line on me, and I'll get there. And I think that the APA and DC have gotten better at that. I think DC's got a lot of challenges with not having the budget that they could use, and I think that would benefit both sides. The people that say, hey, I want to do something with my property, and the people that are interested in protecting that property. I think they would both benefit from an enhanced DEC budget.
Let's go back to your work locally, and again, as we heard people saying today, really your local efforts have gotten out in front of the state in many ways in terms of the regulatory scheme there, the way that stormwater runoff, but also farm waste and other things are regulated. How controversial was that? I mean, when you were working on that, did you have people shouting at you in meetings and saying this is socialism? vandalism, or did
the backdrop on this certainly was, after 11 years of not doing a town revaluation, we survived the town revaluation a few years ago, but because it had been so long, the market had changed so much on lakefront properties that lakefront property owners saw their assessments go up. Now, the immediate, normal human reaction is, you know, that I'm being picked on, I'm being singled out, this isn't fair, I'm going to be paying more now. And there was enough of an issue there locally where, you know, they went through the process to try to create a new village, a new layer of government, and the thought being that somehow that was going to save them, more government was going to be the solution, which I think is counterintuitive to most of them. But they went through that, and the village process didn't happen. But now people are, so they've got raw nerve with taxes and what the property values are doing. We come in with you know, more land use regulation. In Queensbury, our land use regulation, for those of you that are familiar with it, it's a great sport. You know, it's serious business, but it's also something that the community can get very passionate about, and the newspaper loves to write about. And as a town supervisor, it's one of my favorite things to get to deal with. I think I was actually pleasantly surprised that our zoning code revision that incorporated buffers. Queensbury, along with Lake Georgia, both were the first communities that put in significant fertilizer restrictions. Our tree cutting, we have a very robust planning and zoning board process that people go through. And we put money into Asian plans. Warren County was the first county in the state to adopt the invasive species issue law, even ahead of New York State. So we've been proactive, and I think you know, some people, there was some pushback, but not. We got more pushback, and certainly Chris and Peter, I think, you know, when he was at the fund, you can remember with the septic maintenance district, Dave Decker and the Lake George Watershed Coalition. They were able to secure some grant funding, and we were going to look at trying to head along the lines of some sort of maintenance inspection program similar to what the county out in the Big Lakes was talking about doing. There's still, I think, some interest in the Queensbury government in looking at that, but that's where we saw the biggest pushback, was in the septic. So they drew a line there, and I said, all right, we're not going to cross that line. But the zoning code itself, we changed the minimum lot sizes on Lake George from 1 acre to 2 acres. And frankly, now this was a few years ago, so this predates Lonnie and her involvement in the APA, but one of the frustrations that I had as a town supervisor at the time, again, I'm thinking to myself, there's 103 towns in the park, there's only 18 that have a land use plan. We are the Queensbury, I always thought that Queensbury was a poster child for doing it right. You know, we weren't one of these municipalities that fought the APA tooth and nail. You know, we went along, and again, about a third of our town is in the park, and 2/3 of the town is outside the park. So we're not an all-park-driven town. So we're in a little different situation than certainly towns that are in the center of the park. But I think, you know, my frustration was a moving goal line. You know, not getting. You know, we submitted our town zoning code, several inches thick. Maybe a quarter of it might be relevant to the park, and the rest is certainly outside the park. But we submit that after, you know, boatloads of public meetings and months of work. And you know, you've got one of the premier legal law firms that work inside the park, Adirondack. You know, so we figured, hey, we've got all our bases covered, and we did a list of comments back from APA, and we go and address them and resubmit it, and we get more comments back. And we started feeling like, oh, this is what those applicants that come to our town complain about when they try to deal with the town. We were kind of getting a little taste of that ourselves with the APA. And again, I'm like, if there's some, I literally said this on the phone, and I can't remember who were like, I'm not going to try because protect the innocent, but you know, there's a town that is doing it better than Queensbury. I want to know who it is. You know? So if we're having this much difficulty dealing with APA, you know, I can only imagine, you know, what some of the other applicants are going through. And so I got a taste of that frustration, but I haven't seen that in recent years.
So we should get Lonnie up here right now.
Lonnie's done a great job. No, I mean, she's doing great.
How many minutes do we have, Dick? One. Okay, so let me ask a final question. You know, as we saw on the maps today, a lot of the environmental issues that are important, whether it's invasive species, whether it's stormwater runoff, a lot of those are going to be handled mostly by the hamlet, right? That's where most of the development is. So Queensbury has gotten out in front of this, and you guys have these rules in place. If you go to local leaders, town supervisors, village mayors, and talk to them about what they're doing, many of them still resist the idea of doing an APA approved plan. Do you think we're at the point in history now where those local government leaders should pivot and start developing the kind of plan that Queensbury did?
Again, I think if you can control your own destiny, who wouldn't want to control their own destiny? Not liking the APA and not wanting to, deal with that process doesn't make it go away. And so if you're one of those, non-believers that says, I don't like the APA and the imposition that we're a rule of law, and they've got the final say. So if you say, well, we're subject to those rules anyways, but we're going to adopt our plan in accordance with those rules and then manage ourselves, my own personal experience is that's been a winner. But I also have to recognize that town of Queensbury is 28,000 people, $3 billion assessed value, most of us outside the park. We've got a staff of 140 people town-wide, including we got a guy dedicated to GIS. I mean, what small town in the Adirondack has a GIS person, has a dedicated planner? I mean, we have a planning staff that's larger than most towns' entire payroll. So it's very easy for Queensbury to say, yeah, do what we did. But the reality is that a lot of these small towns and hamlet villages inside the parks, economically, they can't do it. How you get there, I don't have the easy answer for that.
All right, Assemblyman Dan Stec, I'm really grateful and appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks very much.